is a book for the basic study of Buddhism. So, and then this starts off with the life of the Buddha, and gradually it teaches the principles of the Dhamma. So, this first chapter is on the life of the Buddha. And it starts off with the chapter like this. India is respected all over the world today as the land of the Buddha. The Lord Buddha, as Prince Siddhartha, was born and bred in northern India, current Nepal. In the past, it was known as Jambudvipa, as it was known in ancient time. Now here, Jambudvipa is a continent according to the Buddhist canonical records. At that time, there wasn't a country called India, no Nepal or Pakistan or Bangladesh. So when we read Buddhist scripture, whenever we come across with a word called a Jambudvipa, a country called Jambudvipa, that means a continent that occupies currently India, Nepal, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, and even to Sri Lanka. So this whole area is known as Jambudvipa. And according to the historians, and also found in the Buddhist scripture, it suggests that at that time the Jambudvipa was divided into 16 different states. 16 different states. And that starts from Anga, Magadha, the country called Anga, country called Magadha, country called Kasi, Kosala, Vajji, Malla, Chedi, Vamsa, Kuru, Panchala, Macha, Surasena, Vasaka, Avanti, Kandhara, and Cambodia. So these are the 16 countries at that time. And these 16 continent or countries comes under the name called the Jambudvipa. Kasi, particularly here one is called Kasi, now currently known as Varanasi in India, which is still the same name as it was. Rest have changed. All the other names have been changed, and which is obvious that it will change over a period of time. But however, just need to understand that India was not named those days, and the word India simply came after the British colony in India, and named India from Indus Valley. That Indus again came from a river called Sindhu. Okay? So that's how this Jambudvipa meant by these 16 continents. Okay? try to look at any comments from. I want to see here. Try to look at any comments from. Okay, right. So, and if you have any question or any thing you want to ask, you can. Okay. So this is just to give you an idea. Or any thing you want to ask, you can. Okay. And this is the idea of this Jambu Deepa. And Jambu or Damba is the beautiful colored little fruit. So Jambu is basically a fruit at that time found in that continent. It's like a rose apple. After the birth of the Bodhisattva, Prince Siddhartha, this country further came to be known as the land of the Buddha. So here, not India referring, but it is referring to the Jambudipa as a whole. Okay, when it is referring to this Jambudipa whole, then that I always have to remember that India, Nepal, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh and Sri Lanka are regarded as in that country. It is useful to learn some facts about the vast country, especially its conditions as it was at the time of Lord Buddha's birth. India is a country with a very long history. Again, so giving here the facts and the information about India. Now, India in English we call India, but locally they call Bharata. Okay, this is also have to remember here. India is English given name under the base of the Indus Valley, whereas the local people call themselves Bharata. And this Bharata again came from the great legend of Mahabharata, the battle between brothers, and it relates to the Lord Krishna. So the story is that there were 5 brothers born of one queen, and then there were 100 brothers born of another queen. And it happened that the first queen's all 5 children, the eldest one's name was Bharata, and known as the righteous king later on. So on the basis of that legend, this land was known as Bharata. Bharata came from the king Bharata, who was the righteous king in the legend called Mahabharata, the great war of this Hindu scripture. And it appears that the word Bharata been implemented to this continent not that long ago. But however, after the independence, it becomes more visible as the Bharata. So today it is a republic, and before that was a British colony. So now again here he is saying nowadays it is a republican country since the British colony ended in 1940s. After that, India became the republican or democratic republican country, which has got the constitution as the governing body, and each state has got their own chief ministers, and they can decide their own internal laws. It's like Scotland has got its own parliament. So in India there are so many divided states, and each state has got its own chief minister, and this chief minister again has a connection with the main governing body and run by the Prime Minister. Although they have a president, but president is just like a head of the state, hasn't got much power. Prime Minister does the rest of the governing and political side of the country. In his very ancient days, it was a very prosperous country with many kingdoms. And here, as I said, many countries. That here basically means the 16 countries that I mentioned early on. It had its own kings and queens and ministers and massive palaces. Of course, it had many kings, maybe too many, that led to many wars and disunity later. So obviously, it is more inclined to say that the more you have separate states, more war comes, simply to expand their land or expand their territories. Some 2,600 plus years ago, at the time of the Prince Siddhartha was born, this country, due to its size, was divided into many kingdoms. North India alone had 16 kingdoms. So again, coming back to these 16 kingdoms, 2,600 years ago. Amazing, isn't this? Such a long time back. And so this war, again, is simply an expansion of this each and individual state. Now, even when we look at the history of this English Ireland, there were so many wars between England and Scotland, England and Wales, and Scotland and England, and Wales and England, and like that. And even within the England itself, there were so many lords, and they were again established themselves as like the kings of these states, and later on, because of that, led so many wars, and eventually become a nation which has got one king who rules over it. And that even happened later on, as we know that even Scotland become part of it, and eventually later on again separate states with the separate governing bodies that developed. So that happened in the time of the king, in the time of when the Buddha was born too. So now it's talking about another 4 kingdoms in the north. As are we dealing with the life of the Buddha, we are limiting ourselves to 4 kingdoms in the north. One is the kingdom of Kosala, where the Buddha was born and bred, and the other 3, the kingdom around it, where the Buddha traveled, often reaching the Dhamma or the doctrine. The kings of these kingdoms helped the Blessed One much in developing his own kingdom of Dhamma that had no land. So here, one of the 16 great countries at that time of the Buddha, when the Buddha was born, that one country called the Kosala. And Kosala had one of the powerful and massive country at that time, who has got more power. It's like a European Union, and having let's say maybe France or Germany has more powerful, more power over other countries to decide or legislate any other any other businesses. Same like a Kosala. And under the Kosala, there were another 4 countries. And one of them is the Kapilavastu, where the Buddha was born. So that's why it's like a United Kingdom with 4 countries. 4 countries. So the Kosala has again as extra another 4 countries. Kosala rules over it, but each country, like Kapilavastu, Kolia, and these other 4 countries, had their own kingdom and own policies and own like a parliament, like a Scottish parliament, like that. So if you look at the map of India, to the north of India, we will see a huge range of a mountain rise. That is the Great Himalayan Range. Hundreds of rivers flow down from it, while huge trees provide shade and shelter to thousands of strange animals and birds living within their forests. During some seasons, as in countries of Europe, snow caps the mountain tops. And now, close by were the 3 other kingdoms by name Magadha, Vamsa, and Avanti. These capitals are also important enough to know, since it was in these capitals where people gathered most that the Buddha preached often. Magadha's capital was Rajagaha, where resided the Magadha king Bimbisara, later succeeded by his son Ajatasattu. So here, Kosala was the hub for people to come around. And Kosala, its capital city was the within that Kosala there was another country called Magadha, and Magadha was flourished by the businesses, and as a result of that it was a hub, and that's simply because and it was like a fortress. The mountain, both sides are coming like a shape, yeah, and there's mountain covers and this hollow bit. It's like a mountain itself is shielding this whole country, this Magadha. There's one way coming and one way going down. So that's why this Magadha became the very prosperous at that time. And within that Magadha city, there's a small hill with the cave. And nowadays, even you can go up to the hill, and on the top of the hill there is a space made a small area believed to be a kuti, or the hut that the Buddha lived there. And below that there are so many other caves designated that all other main disciples lived around that area. So that's called a Rajagaha. And during this Rajagaha time, when the Buddha came back and stayed in that city, in that country called Magadha, during that time King Bimbisara was the king, and he was very devoted. He was very devoted king, and he was really in favor of the Buddha's teachings and supported a lot. But it happened later, he was assassinated or killed by his own son. So his son Ajatasattu became the king later on. And southward of Magadha was the kingdom of Vamsa, with its capital at Kosambi. King Udena ruled here. Further south was the kingdom of Avanti, with its capital at Ujjaini, ruled by King Pochato. These kings were usually related to each other by marriage, through that they did not prevent them from fighting with each other now and then. All these kings lived in the lifetime of the Buddha, hence their names appear often in Buddhist literature. So there are another 2 kingdoms, Kosambi and Ujjaini, are also famous, particularly King Udena also visits the Buddha a couple of times and discussed on the Dhamma. Now let's talk about the kingdom of Kosala. Kosala had as its capital Savatthi, a very prosperous and crowded city. Many events in the Buddha's life took place in and around this city because his father, a king of the Sakya clan and a solar or a sun race, was a provincial king of the Kosala Kosala kingdom ruling from Kapilavastu. Since these kingdoms were very large, they were broken up into provinces, and the rulers of these two were called kings. So then further, thus Suddhodana, father of Prince Siddhartha too, was a king of a province that had its own capital. Its name was Kapilavastu, named after Kapila, a sage who had resided there earlier. The whole area was beautiful to behold, for it included the Himalayan mountains slopes which today are in Nepal. Nepal as a separate country did not exist in the time of the Buddha. The river Ganges flowed in the ocean across it. The river Ganges around its waters, the Buddha traveled on foot hundreds of miles preaching his noble doctrines. Sometimes he traveled alone, sometimes with his monks, all in yellow robes, and always they walked on foot, so that they could meet the poor and simple folk to listen to their problems and advise them. As the son of the king, the Buddha could have owned chariots and horse-drawn carriages, but he preferred to walk. At night, he and his disciples, if they were not offered proper shelter, slept in open spaces with the sky as their roof. It was the life of the wanderers that he and his bhikkhu led. They cooked no meals and fed on what was given to them by people. At night, they avoided food. Their main aim was to help and advise the needy and the distressed. It was a glorious sight to see rows and rows of yellow-robed monks training behind the Buddha along the shores of the Ganges, looking so calm and serene. As they walked thus, they made the river's waters glow yellow and gold. People chanted sadhu, sadhu. On this, I just wanted to comment here, the sadhu, sadhu. Sadhu, sadhu, it's something that all the Buddhists normally say whenever somebody has done something good, or whenever somebody has said something nice, meritorious. So even in our center here, whenever somebody offers, then we always say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu for 3 times. And even when we recognize someone's good deed, again, we also say sadhu, sadhu, sadhu for 3 times, which basically means rejoicing, saying, yes, you have done great. Yes, you have said well, like that. So people chanted sadhu, sadhu on they walked across all the 4 kingdoms of Kosala, Magadha, Vatsa and Avanti. Sometimes they walk away from those to distant places and lands, helping people and talking to them and advising them. They never asked anything in return, but they needed food to survive. In their hands were bowls in which devout people placed food. Food was accepted from anyone, be they of a high birth or of very low birth. The Buddha did not believe in the differences between high and low families. Here, one sentence say, they never ask anything in return. Here, I remember a couple of days ago, I received a call from a lady and asked about meditation, mindfulness meditation at the Health Village. So I gave her information about the mindfulness Mondays at the Health Village. And after I explained to her all the schedules and place, she asked me how much for the classes. And then I said, I do not charge for it. I even pay for my own car park, so we do not charge any. And then she reminded, she spoke, no, I mean, how much in pounds you charge? So then I said, no, we do not charge. You don't have to pay any. We do not force you to pay at all. So you just come and participate. So she went on silent little while, and then she said she will come to join coming Mindful Mondays at the Health Village. So I hope she comes and join the Mindfulness Mondays. But again, I do not know her, whether she comes or not, unless she explains that she had spoken to me. But anyway, we'll see. But it is just, would like to tell the story that, as a monk, we do not ask or we do not put the price on our teachings or our services. So we offer from our heart, hoping for the good and the benefit of whoever comes to listen and get some ideas and get practice, so that will help them to get the physical and mental well-being. Yeah? So that's why we do not charge at all. As I said, I even pay on car park, and particularly in Health Village, whenever I'm teaching, I miss my lunch, and again, I do not mind. I see that the benefits of the practice of a meditation, that really beneficial for whoever comes and practice. That's why Dhamma has more noble things in there rather than charging for that costs more than money, monetary. So next passage, he preached that a person becomes high or low by his or her own act alone. All this happened in a time phase around 2,500 to 2,600 years ago in the subcontinent of India. Now here again, the Buddha is simply referring that at that time there wasn't any caste system. And there is no high and a low. And when we look at the Buddhist scripture, we also found that there were not like a caste system at the time of the Buddha. It was emerging, but not practiced as strongly as it was found after the Buddha's time, and even until recent history, before the 18th century. So before Prince Siddhartha was born, there were many preachers in India who formed many cults, sometimes also called religions. The Nigantha and the Jains had their own cult. Some worshipped huge trees, some to sun, the moon, the sky, and even to the rain. Even today, there are many different religious beliefs, and cults in the world. The Buddha, but what the Buddha preached in India so long ago was entirely a new religion. The many castes, creeds that balked people in misery and disunity he ignored and opposed. He saw how humans suffered and studied the cause of suffering until human life lasted. He wished the human to lead pure and correct lives, avoiding evil doing. He himself was no god, nor did he claim godly origin. He was just the human born of a mother and a father, just like you and me. In the next chapter, we will learn more about the Buddha's parents and the royal family to which he belonged. Here, I just would like to give a comment that during the time of the Buddha, there were very famous 6 philosophers, and sometimes also claimed as religious leaders. And among these 6 great leaders at that time, we can still find one philosophy that still exists and practiced, that is the Jains. Which the founder of this Jainism was the Niganthanatha Buddha, or this Nigantha Nathaputra. I forgot his name, real name. And this Jain, the founder, was, I think, 6 years older than the Buddha. So during the time when the Buddha left the palace in search of the truth, at that time Jains were already practicing, and it was widely practiced at that time. So when Jain, the Niganthanatha, he died before the Buddha passed away. So Buddha was alerted by followers that after this Niganthanatha was, when he passed away, his disciples divided in each other and had a lot of quarrel, a lot of fighting and disputes about the teachings. So when it was reported to the Buddha, and even some suggested to compile Buddha's teachings, and the Buddha kept silent. And with that resulted the Venerable Sariputta, who was the right-hand side of the Buddha, compiled some of his teachings in a numerical way. So that is called the Samgiti Sutta, which again we can find in the discourses. One of the very famous discourse called the Samgiti Sutta, which means that compilation of the different discourses that the Buddha gave in a numerical way, and a linear development, and which again some believe that on the basis of this way of methodologically compiling teachings of the Buddha, developed the Abhidhamma, which is the higher teachings. So that is, and now again I will stop here for today of this chapter, and the following days I will read further chapters just to learn basic understanding of the Buddha and his life and his teachings later on. So thank you everyone for joining, and thank you Margaret and One Pen and Prani for listening. Now it's time for the practice of a meditation. Sitting in comfortable position and practice. practicing. So take yourself, be mindful of yourself and sitting comfortably. Take a few long breaths. And aware of a breath coming in and going out. You may feel the breath in your nose or in your belly. And settle yourself down. Just keep watching, aware of this breath. If you are feeling the breath in your belly, just observing rising, falling. Whenever you feel it rises due to the breath coming in, or whenever you're feeling falling due to the breath going out, just observing it. So breathing in, breathing out. So tonight, simply learning to focus on the breath as you breathe in and breathe out. So if you're focusing on the rising, falling of abdomen, just focusing on there and mentally making a note of it. Or if you are following the breath at the nose, then simply making a note of breathing in and breathing out. Sukhito Homi. May I be happy. Ahani Avero Homi. May I be free from hatred. Akaya Bacho Homi. May I be free from ill will. Aniko Homi. May I be free from mentally and physically distressed. May Sukhi Atanang Pariharami. May I be able to maintain my happiness. Sabbe Satta. Whatever beings there are, we all have to go through old age, sickness, and death. Sukhiyata, Sukhita Hontu. May all beings be happy. Avera Hontu. May all beings be free from hatred. Aviya Baja Hontu. May all beings be free from ill will and jealousy. Anika Hontu. May all beings be free from physical and mental distress. Sukhiyatanang Pariharantu. May all beings be able to protect their own happiness, and may they be liberated. Nibbana Pachayo Hontu. Let's pay respect to the Buddha. Aham Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagavan Buddhang Bhagavantang Abhivademi. Swakhato Bhagavata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami. Subhatipanno Bhagavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami. Thank you, Margaret, and have a good night. Thank you, เจริญพรยมวันเนาะสาธุอนุโมทนาได้เจอกันวันพรุ่งนี้สาธุหายโชคดีมีชัย Thank you, good night. See you tomorrow.